Welcome to High Tech in the Heartland. I'm Bob Goff. This is Scott Richardson. Welcome to another edition. And Scott is going to let you give you a little background and a little disclaimer.
Little disclaimer, yeah, I'm a patent attorney here in Quincy, Bob, and even though I'm speaking to people today, and you might be listening, this doesn't form any sort of client-attorney relationship. And then also, I'm not giving legal advice. Nothing I say. I may talk about patent things or legal things from time to time, but you'd have to be a client of mine and I have to know your situation to give legal advice. And then finally, I work for East Coast law firm Robinson Cole, and I am not speaking on behalf of Robinson Cole here today. I'm just talking as a private citizen who's interested in things high-tech in the heartland, Bob.
And even though he's got a Robinson Cole coffee mug, they are not paying us for that. That
No,
is
they're
not product
not.
placement,
Okay,
so let's
yeah.
be perfectly clear.
Should we put some tape over
No,
that?
it's fine. Well, I think we made it perfectly
That's my
clear,
employer, so yeah.
What is our topic today?
We're going to talk about LED lighting, and
Why?
It's a topic. Well, it's a topic that it doesn't just generate a lot of excitement, but it has a huge impact to the world. Yeah, we need the drum.
Yeah, right.
We need the drum. But first, I'm going to talk about inventions in general, and there are two. I mean, you could classify inventions in two broad categories, like pioneering inventions where there was nothing like this before. Like, for example, the telegraph. Before the telegraph, the speed of information traveled at about the speed of a galloping horse. And then after Alexander Graham Bell invented the telegraph, then you could send information instantaneously hundreds of miles. Mm-hmm. And same with radio and television.
Around here we have that. It's called Telebritney.
There you go. And then also there are most inventions though are improvement inventions where there are hundreds of patents issued each year on, say, the computer or the car or whatever. Nobody's inventing the computer or the car. It's already invented. They're just making a small improvement invention. Mm-hmm. And for improvement inventions, I like to think of a category of them that's also I guess it's only for improvement. It's not for pioneering inventions, but for improvement inventions, they're conquering inventions. And that's my own term. And for a long time, I thought they should come up with a word for that, because sometimes there's a technology that exists, and then somebody invents something, and it's so awesome. It's so much better that it just conquers the first one. Mm-hmm. I mean, you just, like, I don't know how familiar you are with farming, but as soon as they came out with air planters, nobody ever again bought the old planters with the plates,
No.
and that was the death knell of them. It completely ended.
Yeah.
And then like a couple of other examples that you have in your house are plastic ice cube trays. Mm-hmm. Remember the old aluminum ones where you had to pull as soon as those plastic ones came out, nobody ever once again bought the aluminum ones. They were like dead.
Well, and then those plastic ones, of course, you would like break them because they'd break in the plastic. But now, most people, of course, have ice machines, but the silicone ones now, those are great because they don't break like that. And like I'll get like the really big ice balls or the ice squares for like my bourbon or scotch or whatever. And yeah, those are good. The silicone ones are fantastic.
Well, maybe that's a conquering invention over the plastic ones.
I think it is, yes.
But anyway, and also like the scissors. Remember the old cast iron scissors where they held together with a screw, and you had to have that screw tight. Just if it was too tight, you couldn't, and if it was too loose, the paper would go between the blades. Yep. And then when they came out with the stainless steel scissors, as soon as they came out with this, nobody ever again bought the old cast iron ones.
Never again.
Well, anyway, LED lighting is what I would call a conquering invention, and it's taken a while to get some ground, to really take a hold. But in 2010, 1% of the lighting sold was LED lighting. Today, it's like 75 or 80%, mm-hmm. And I mean, pretty soon it's probably going to be close to 100%. And also, during that same time, like remember back when we were kids, all cars had incandescent lights on the front of them. Had the little lamp with the filament or whatever. Uh-huh. Now, 0% of new cars are made with incandescent lights. You can't buy a car with incandescent lights. No. It just doesn't exist. So
no, and when you talk about that, it's not only for that. It's also the interior of the car. It's the headlights. It's the whole 9 yards. So,
but the story of LED lighting is really it's a story of blue LEDs, because the first LEDs they made, the LED was invented. The diode was invented in 1962, and a short time later they invented light-emitting diodes. And
was this General Electric?
Yeah, actually, you're right. How did you know that?
I just remember stuff
You're like
like
a
that.
Welfont of trivia, Bob.
Sometimes it just pops in my head. Well, at one time, and I don't know if that's still the case, but even into the mid 2000s, GE was the largest company in the world. Period.
Oh, sure.
I'm sure they've been surpassed by like Apple or Google or somebody, but in the mid 2000s, like the financial crisis before 08 and everything, GE was still the largest company in the world because they built all this stuff, and then they also had their own. They also did their own little financial thing too as well.
Yeah, GE Finance. Yeah, and stellar high quality too. Everybody looked up to GE as like the great shining example of an American company.
Yeah, owned NBC at one time.
Yeah, but anyway, they invented the red LED first, and there's a reason for that, and it has to do with the materials that are in a diode that generate light. But GE generated that, and then after that, and you'd never guess who invented the green LED. The green LED came along. It was Monsanto of all companies, which
really,
it's not ironic. It's the opposite of ironic. It's fitting because Monsanto and green, they're known for like plant stuff, right?
And AstroTurf.
Yeah.
They had the first AstroTurf that destroyed like a bunch of pro football players' knees in the 70s. But yeah, before it like became softer and better. But I remember I actually was AstroTurf was ahead at Busch Stadium. Of course, Monsanto was headquartered in St. Louis or East St. Louis or Metro East or wherever. And so St. Louis, the old Busch Stadium, got some of the first AstroTurf. And even in the mid '80s, it was kind of it really hadn't evolved much since it came out in the early '70s. And I remember walking on it when I was covering a Cardinals baseball game for the television station in Columbia, and it would just soak up the heat. And if you had tennis shoes on, it would get so hot, your shoes would start to melt.
Yeah.
So you had to like stand on the turf to interview a player, but then you had to get in the dugout, and even standing on the concrete, just bare concrete that the sun was shining on, wasn't as hot as the AstroTurf.
And it was scratchy too. I mean, people got tackled on that.
Burns.
Big abrasion and stuff.
Awful.
So just crazy. But anyway, back to LEDs.
Please.
The story of LEDs is the story of the story of LED lighting is the story of blue LEDs, because in order to create white light, you have to have all the colors of light broadcast. And they had green and they had red and they needed blue, RGB. They needed a blue LED. And so there was an immense effort, like pretty much every major company in the world was doing research trying to be the first to develop the blue LED. But the blue LED was actually, and the story of blue LEDs is the story of this one humble engineer, Shuji Nakamura, who worked for this small, tiny little Japanese semiconductor company, and he was like totally tenacious. He started working on blue LEDs in the mid '80s, and he's the one that finally came through and invented them in 1992. But I'm going to back up a little bit. I'm going to talk actually about diodes, and then I'm going to talk about LEDs, light-emitting diodes. And I'm going to explain a little bit how they work. First of all, semiconductors, everybody thinks, okay, it's a semiconductor, that's silicon, right? It's kind of right. It's not pure silicon, because pure silicon, it comes in a lattice structure. Pure silicon has 4 valence electrons. If you can imagine the atom, a silicon atom, 4 valence electrons. And then in the lattice, there are rows of silicon rows, and then stacked, in 3D. And then each of these silicon atoms, the 4, actually is adjacent to the next one, and each of these silicon atoms shares a valence electron with its adjacent one on every side. And so you can say that each atom of silicon in pure silicon has 8 valence electrons associated with it, right? Okay, bear with me.
I got you. I'm good.
And the thing is, you can apply electricity to one end of pure silicon, and it's not a semiconductor. Nothing's happening. So what they do to make a semiconductor out of pure silicon, they dope it with an impurity, another element. For example, they can dope it with boron, or they can dope it with I forget what they phosphorus. If they dope it with phosphorus, each atom has 5 valence electrons. So when I say dope it, they actually introduce an impurity to that. And when they do that, these phosphorus atoms are spread throughout the silicon, and they have extra valence electrons. And so what that means is that if you apply a little electricity to what's called an N-type junction, it actually electrons move through there because there are extra electrons. But if you dope it with boron, that's called a p-type junction. If you dope it with boron, there's one less. It creates a hole because there are only 3 valence electrons with boron.
When you mention phosphorus, though, that would to me, when I think phosphorus, I think maybe there's a glow or a light to it, right? Or is that
that may have something to do? No, it doesn't have anything to do with this, but that may have something to do with phosphorus. Okay. But yeah, you're right. Phosphorus then burns like crazy too. Yeah. But anyway, like in a typical semiconductor device, they have an N-type semiconductor and a P-type semiconductor, and they're fastened together. And then what that does is when they bias that device with a voltage, that either, depending on how they bias it, if they bias the N-type with P, with positive, and the P-type with N, if they bias it the wrong way, it opens up the gap between them and no electricity flows. And then if they do it the other way, if they bias it with positive to the P-type and negative to the N-type, that closes the gap and electrons flow through there freely, and that makes a switch, basically a switch. That's part of how a transistor works,
right?
And that's how a diode works. A diode is just it's actually an active device. It seems like, or is it? Maybe it is a passive device. I can't.
So the lighting itself, though, why is it just cheaper or more efficient? Is that why we have switched to LED lighting?
Well, it's superior in almost every respect, except for costs, and costs are coming down.
Right.
But
I would have thought they would already been down by now because LED's been around a long time.
Yeah, and the device I was talking about with the N junction and the P junction, I know we're getting down in the details here, but that's a diode. And a light emitting diode, actually it's a diode, but it does emit light. If you were to go between these two junctions, infrared light is emitted. But you don't see it because, first of all, they're placed right next to each other in the device. And then second of all, it's infrared, so we can't see infrared. But once scientists discovered that a diode creates infrared light, they started tinkering around with it, and that's when they came up with the LED back in 1962, GE. And the thing is, the materials I was talking about, silicon doped with boron and doped with phosphorus, those create the red. Those create like an infrared light. And then if you use different materials, it creates different lights. And the light depends on the valence electrons that jump from the N-type to the P-type. And by the way, the electrons flow from N-type to P-type, but the electricity flows the other way because electrons carry a negative charge. But anyway, they use different materials, and the electrons, when they jump, the amount of energy where they land in the P-type is different, and something has to be done with that energy, and it creates light. It creates a photon of light.
So when you have like the LED lights that we're using here, and they are bright and they work great and everything, but they don't put out the heat that the old lights do either, correct?
That's one of the 3 advantages, yeah. I mean, well, they don't put out the heat, and they're more robust in that, like, remember the old incandescent lights? Did you ever have a trouble light for your car? Like,
oh, sure.
I remember that trouble light, so you'd like move it or kick it or something, it'd just blow out. Because that red hot filament was just very fragile.
Yeah.
But LEDs, you can really bounce them around. You can't break them, basically.
Well, yeah, and the old filaments with, especially like you got one of the old flash cameras that had one of those, had the bulb in here and the filament, and you had the one shot and it was done and everything. But yeah, no, LED lighting is just like you said. It just seems more. It has so many more advantages, and I mean, like you said, not only cars, but. It's really difficult to even find the old light bulbs now, isn't it? I mean, you can.
I don't think they're sold anymore, are they?
Well, because the government kind of phased them out, right? They said, hey, switch to this.
Well, I don't think that was the government. I think that was the marketplace.
Really?
Yeah, because the thing is that
some states, though, I believe, regulated that though, and said, hey, you have to switch to this, no more.
Oh, okay, that may be.
Yeah,
I was.
Lord knows that's something Illinois would do.
Well, I don't know if they did, but I could see some government, California or Illinois or something like that. But anyway, so they had to develop the blue LED, and once scientists figured out that just a diode was creating infrared light, then they started tinkering with different materials and trying to find out, what kind of materials can they use, what kind of substrate can they use, and what kind of doping can they use to create different colors of light. And initially, infrared is close to red, so they came up with the red LED right away. And then they came up with the green LED not too long after that, and then the yellow LED. And when I went to school in electrical engineering, they just had those three colors. Your choices were red and green and yellow, and no blue at that time. Although blue was invented, I guess it was invented like 7 years after I got out of college. But and I said at the beginning of this that the story of blue LEDs and the significance again of blue LEDs is in order to create white light, which is what all LED lighting is, they had to have blue LEDs, and they didn't. It was like a huge problem. They couldn't come up with it. And pretty much every company in the world was researching this, and there was this one little company, Nichia, is a semiconductor maker in Japan, and they were researching it, and they had one guy who was their main guy on it, Shuji Nakamura. And the story of this guy is just fascinating. He was just tenacious as all get out. Initially, the founder of the company supported him, and they were losing money on their semiconductors, but they wanted him to come up with the blue LED that would save the company and all this. And they gave him what was equivalent of like $3 million in funding to come up with this, which was a huge amount at the time. I think the company revenues per year back then in like 1990 or 91 were like $50 million, and they gave him a $3 million budget to come up with this.
Wow.
But he had started out in the like 87 or 88, something like that, and he was working on it. And at one time, he actually left the company. They allowed him to leave, and he went to Florida to work with another company that was more advanced in what he was doing. And they put him to work building a device, it's the device which MOCVD device, and that's the device that does the doping. And he thought he was going to be a researcher working with all the PhDs and the researchers there. But when he got there, they viewed him, he didn't have a PhD, and they viewed him like a technician. They're like, okay, go in this room over here, and we have a new MOCVD device, and we want you to assemble it. We want you to like put this one together so we can work with it and do our research. And they just kind of shunned him. And so the months he spent there were like he was really unhappy, and he was very bitter because he didn't have his PhD and he was treated like a technician. But one thing he did is when he was putting that thing together, he became intimately familiar with how it worked. So when he came back to Japan and he's in his own little lab and he has all this equipment that's cobbled together, he's able to actually take his own MOCVD machine, and he can make alterations on the fly. He can weld things together and put ports here and there and move the jets around and the nozzles. And so he was really going to town with his research. And at about that time, they had I know I'm talking about this guy a lot, but it's a cool story, this guy with Shoji Nakamura. They had a technical conference, and one of the categories of this conference was the development of the blue LED. And there were, at that time, there were two different candidates. I told you they were working with all different kinds of materials. And instead of silicon, they were going to use zinc selenide. That was like, everybody was working on zinc selenide, doping it with different materials to make the blue LED. And they actually had two different sessions going on, and they had the zinc selenide session, and 500 people attended that. There were 500 researchers from around the world that went to this. And then they had the gallium nitride session, and that was the material that this guy Nakamura was working with. It was gallium nitride. 5 people attended it.
Because
nobody was working on it. Nobody was working on it.
And also, they thought this guy, since he didn't have a PhD, he wasn't as hoity-toity as these other guys.
Well, nobody even knew him at that point.
Right, yeah.
But 2 of the 5 guys were these 2, Akasaki and Amano. And Akasaki was a professor at a university, and then the other guy, Amano, was his grad student who became his research partner. And they were like the world's foremost experts in gallium nitride, research. And so anyway, the Nakamura, Shuji Nakamura, talked to these guys and talked to them about their research and got some ideas for how to proceed. And he ended up making some great innovations toward his blue LED using their ideas. And they were kind of, they were sharing information because it was a real small group. It was only 5 guys working on this one. Everybody else was working on the other one. And the other one, they had IBM was working on it, and Fairchild, and Texas Instruments, and GE, and Motorola, and pretty much everybody that was in semiconductors and electronics was working on the blue LED at that time.
Right. And when was this again?
Well, this is in the late 80s, early 90s.
All right.
But anyway, this guy, Shuji Nakamura, and I won't get into the details about all the innovations he made, but he was able to, there were like 3 major problems with using gallium nitride, and he overcame all those 3 problems, and he ended up coming up with the blue LED. And like at the technical conference where he introduced it, it wasn't just 500 to 5. It was every single person came to his session to see like this little tiny blue LED.
Yeah.
Every single person. And then, and the company that was doing this, their revenues went from $50 million in like 1990, 91 to in 2001, $700 million.
Wow.
And 60% of it was selling blue LEDs because at first they were the only game in town. They were the only ones that sold it. Nobody sold it except them.
Right.
And then pretty soon, they were licensing it out in other companies. But anyway, this guy Shuji Nakamura, he got several patents on blue LEDs and the innovations he did and all that. And his monetary and also this company is making hundreds of millions of dollars on his invention. They gave him $170 per patent for his reward. That's his bonus. $170.
Wow.
Yeah, $170.
Yeah, he should have negotiated that a little better.
Well, he's an engineer. He wasn't a businessman.
Obviously.
But and also during this time, while he was doing this, like at first the founder supported him, gave him a $3 million budget to do this, but then the founder, stepped down and his son took over, and the son did not want this. He wanted this ended. It was like a cash drain. And they instructed him, they told him, they sent him a memo saying, shut down your research. We don't want you spending any more time on this blue LED stuff. It's not the way to go. And besides, you're working on gallium nitride. That's not the way to go. If you were going to do it, you want to work on this zinc selenide that everybody else is doing. That's the way to go. And Shuji Nakamura's response to that was to like wad it up and throw it in the trash and just keep working on it. And he's like, he's in there with his welder and he's, putting new ports on and everything. And he made this awesome invention and he saved the company and made him a fortune.
And didn't get crap for it.
And he didn't get crap for it.
Just got to pay his regular paycheck.
I think he was a little bit bitter over not getting anything.
Yeah, I think I would have been too, yeah.
I mean, because that was a whole industry worldwide and he didn't get anything for it. So anyway, he ended up eventually leaving the company that didn't reward him at all. And he came to the United States and he was consulting with some other company, helping them get their operations on order and everything. And so what does his original Japanese company do? They sue him. They sue him saying, well, you're giving away our trade secret. Those trade secrets belong to us, which is actually a valid point if he was giving away trade secrets. I don't know if he was or not. But they sued him in a Japanese court of law. And the result of that suit was he countersued them for compensation for his invention, and the court awarded him $200 million.
Good for him. Good.
It's like a happy ending.
He deserved it.
Except it's not quite a happy ending, Bob.
Why not?
Well, because, the way...
You're going to tell me he died, right?
The way court cases work is they give you this giant judgment, $50 million, and then the lawyers, well, yeah, you didn't address this argument, this, and it should be $20 million or it should be $10 million or whatever. And they whittled it down to $8 million that they paid off. And almost all of it went to lawyers.
Well, of course it did.
He didn't make anything.
Well, okay, that stinks.
Shuji Nakamura.
Well, a tragic figure then. Smart guy, but a tragic figure.
But anyway, like worldwide, in 2010, I don't remember, did I mention these stats? In 2010, 1% of the lighting sold was LED lighting.
Yes.
Today, like 70 to 80% is LED lighting.
Yeah, it's a big deal, no doubt about it.
And I'm told that like the carbon footprint of all the lighting, if it was all, like the previous technology, the difference in carbon footprint between the old technology and because the LED lighting has, a very small carbon footprint. The carbon footprint is equivalent to basically all the cars in America, all the automobiles in America. That's the world impact.
Previously or now?
No, the difference between the savings.
Oh, the savings. Okay, all right. Well, that makes sense. That makes sense.
The reduction in carbon imprint would be like if we turned all the cars in America off. That's how much of an impact LED lighting has had on the world.
So the moral of the story is?
Be tenacious. But, be tenacious, but also this guy was lucky as hell too, because when he went to America and he worked for this little company and they treated him like crap, they basically made him into a technician. Oh, go assemble our equipment and all that. He decided, I got to earn my PhD. And in Japan, and I don't know if this is still true today, but in Japan at that time, if you could publish 5 scholarly papers, you could be awarded a PhD.
Wow.
And so his goal was to publish 5 papers. And so he looked at these 2 different materials. He looked at the gallium nitride and the zinc selenide. The zinc selenide, everybody was like researching it, and all dozens, hundreds of papers are being published on it. And then he looks at gallium nitride and he's like, nobody's working on that. Nobody's publishing any papers. I could probably get a bunch of papers published on that. I'm going into that. And so that's why he took that path. Just luck of the Irish.
Well,
or luck of the Japanese.
Japanese in this case, yes. So, well, very good. Again, so LED, there's a lot to it, and again, it is the in this term of lighting technology, it obviously is the prevalent technology, and it is something that certainly has taken hold in our world.
It's a conquering technology.
It is, no doubt about it.
It's completely pushed down. Incandescent lighting is gone.
Yeah, no,
we'll never see it again. I mean, it's going the way of the vacuum tube, which basically it's like a vacuum tube.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and that's a whole other thing. We can talk because vacuum tubes actually it goes back to here and the things that would be built here in Quincy back in the day.
In doing that, it never occurred to me the parallels between vacuum tubes and solid state electronics, transistor electronics, and then incandescent lighting and LED lighting. It's like totally parallel.
Yeah. It is. It's sort of two branches off the same tree, I guess, if you look at it that way.
Well, because transistors, that's another conquering technology. Because as soon as they invented transistors, they never made vacuum tubes again. I mean,
so are we going to do transistors in 2 weeks?
What's that?
Are we going to do transistors in 2 weeks when we come back?
Well, that's kind of an old technology. I mean, that was invented not too long after the diode.
We can talk about the phasing of transition or of transistors and what's after that. So, well,
actually, I'll tell you a little anecdote about transistors and about computers generally. But when I was in high school, and I went to the engineering convocation. They had E-Week at the University of Nebraska, which is where I attended college. I was from a farm in Nebraska. And so I attended that, and I listened to the key speaker was Jay Forrester. And his contribution to technology, it was just a flash in the pan, but it actually led the way to using software for computers. Because before his invention, and what he invented was the mag core memory, the magnetic core memory, where you could change the polarity of a magnet by running electricity one way, or if you ran it the other way, it would be one polarity. If you ran it the other way, it would be the other polarity. And mag core memory, it only existed for like a year or two.
Right.
And then they came up with transistors, which were much better.
Sure.
But before he invented the mag core memory, they didn't have reprogrammable software. They had to actually rewire computers to make them to change programs. And also computers, and that was back in the days of, vacuum tubes, and computers that fill up a whole room or a warehouse or something.
And the old anecdote is we have more computing power in our phones than they had on the final, Apollo missions. So,
yeah. But actually, that was kind of cool meeting that one guy. And because he came up with that invention, and then immediately they came up with a better invention that that supplanted it. But
that's just how it works.
Yeah, that's how it works.
Well, again, thanks for stopping by. We'll look forward, if not transistors, something else in 2 weeks. And always good to talk to you. And thanks again for bringing us some great information.
You as well, Bob. And thanks very much.
That's it for this edition of High Tech in the Heartland. I'm Bob Goff, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.